Recording industry as we know it now is not necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of like the banking system. It's not necessarily a bad thing that these things are going down because it's not been going good for quite some time. Sometimes you need to, it's kind of like in, I guess in forestry where you burn some of this wood so that you replenish your forest and so on and so forth. So, okay, so you can look at it in a positive way. Now, you have all this music that doesn't necessarily have to be funneled into a group of people making decisions about what's good or not. Even and a lot of these people don't know what's good or not. So they're making judgments on on the world's creativity. It boils down to just a few people. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely absurd. Now you have a chance where people who don't know the head of this label and don't know this manager and doesn't know this agent, they can still get their music to people. And that's a good thing. You know, now we have to figure out how we can restructure revenue sharing and so on and that kind of thing so that it can still be, you can still have a livelihood at it. But, you know, there are some good things about this remaking of the record industry. Everything you put out has to be great. I mean, that's, you know, knock on wood. Give me some wood. Yeah, you know. Yeah, really. You can't, there's no such thing as, first of all, no, but the general public does not know and does not care whether it took you 10 days to make a record, 10 weeks, or 10 years. It's the end result. It's the product that comes out. So they don't care about, well, the budget was only this big, that's why it didn't sound like, you know, they don't, no. It's not gonna, no. So, whatever you have to do to make sure that it comes out the way you want it to come out, that's what you have to do. You have to have, you know, a good take on the pulse of the recording industry and what people like in a studio. For instance, I know people like coming here because it sounds so good. You want to be able to hear something that sound really good. So that's a positive thing of the many positive things in this place. They're not going to go to a place that, you know, you can do that at home. If you want something to sound terrible, you know, you can do that anywhere. You know, so people are going to have to come in with new ideas. You know, the duality with all this great channel, these great channel strips and stuff, that's a great idea. Having an incredible monitoring system, it's essential. Having a great environment, great lighting, great aesthetics, immaculate bathrooms, key to the recording. If you're going to go out of your house to record, or else you can stay home and record, you know. I mean, Megan and I have a wonderful Neve console right in the living room, and we have no problem just staying home all the time. But when we had to mix, we couldn't mix at home because what's happening, we live in this loft, and the loft sounds so good that everything sounds great. So you don't know exactly what everything sounds like. So you know, it was weird. You know, we'd do a mix at home and it sounded really good, and then we take it somewhere else and there was no bass. You know, but the low end of the place sounds so good. So it's great for tracking. Man, we get these great sounds, tracking and vocals and everything. But to mix, you have to have a really clear environment, something where you're getting the true sound. And this is, I tell you, these two rooms are amazing. So with that, you know, that's you have to have some kind of some forte where people go, well, that if you really want to hear what your stuff really sounds like, you got to go to that studio. I've known Troy for a very long time. I knew his father very well, and so the recording aspect is in the blood. So when Troy builds a studio, he's thinking of a lot of different things, not only the sonics, but the aesthetics and everything that goes into the recording environment is extremely important. So when I came here the first time to listen, and I think Russ Titleman had the same experience I had because I talked to him about it afterwards. We listened to this playback system, and it was the best monitoring system we had ever heard in a studio, and we were just overwhelmed. And we started putting on everything that we had ever worked on and started feeling good about ourselves. You know, it was like, yeah, all right, I'm not so bad after all. This is not bad. This sounds really good. And I could have done that for hours and days. And this is like a little kind of playground, you know, because it sounds so good in both rooms, the playback system, that, you know, wow, it's like, okay, so this is the way it sounds. So, like, if it doesn't sound good, then your stuff doesn't sound good, you know? So, I've worked on 2 projects since that experience. One, mixing the Cadillac record soundtrack here, and mixing the Verbs album here. Both 2 different sounding recordings, but the approach, the accuracy of what I was hearing was dead on, and I could hear, you know, what I needed, and the clarity was there. I could get rough with stuff, but still have it clear. I could turn up the large, if you like to listen loud without a subwoofer, if you like to hear things loud, but you don't want to have it where it closes off up top when you push things too much and it starts to shut down, your high end starts to shut down. Most studios, their big monitors can't really take it, or they haven't been tweaked in so long, in 40 years, that you can't really listen upstairs. Everybody brings their small monitors with them, and they listen like this because they can't play like, you know, if you're rocking and you want to turn the thing up, you got to be, but you got to be able to hear it clearly. This is a customized system, so I don't even know all the components. I have no idea, you know, what makes up this conglomerate behind me, but it's the best sounding system, and you can turn it up loud and still have it clear, and that's the main thing, you know. And it's not too loud, so you can listen on large monitors. It's an amazing experience, especially for a New York studio. I would say it's a perfect blend of contemporary studio record making, but you can also, but it has the sensibility of what it's really like to record and make of it. You know, it's not like a virtual world where you have no idea what really record making is like. It's just everything is in a box, and you know, it's not. But you can go in a box if you want to do that. And I must say I did contribute a little bit to this. Because I was always yelling in Troy's ear, you know, you got to do this. You know, buy some analog channel strips of different types so that you're not boxed into just, you know, some Neve stuff or API stuff. You know, you have some Neve and API and, you know, EMI and whatever, all our favorite stuff, all the stuff that you love. But, you know, we're not going to have a Trident desk and an API desk and a Neve desk and everything. You're going to have, you know, you'll have just the channel strips. And then people can mix and match and do all kinds of stuff, and then have it all tied in with this guy here. So it's the best of everything, really. It's this really, you have everything here. It's really fantastic. I mean, I know for me, I love recording on old Neve consoles and old API consoles. And what I do when I mix here, since I already have that sound going, then I use SSL. I've been able to use to marry the 2 sounds. So if I want to kick it up a notch on the high end without it clouding, you know, sometimes with an old console, if you push a console, right, because you want to get the most out of the preamp and everything, and you push it, sometimes it kind of clouds up on your high end, you know. It's just part of the physics. And so now I can get it up to a certain thing, but then use this guy, and I can push that more, and it can stay clearer at the top end there. And so it's a marriage. You know, I've been able to use my favorite stuff along with the new stuff and have it work very well for me. So it's allowing me to do certain things that I wasn't able to do before, actually. My goal was to really try to play with as many great musicians as possible. And the first session I ever did was in New York at Electric Lady Studios, where I played with the guys on the session, Nathan Watts on bass, who plays with Stevie Wonder, who's been Stevie Wonder's musical director for, I don't know, 30 years. Michael Cimbello was on guitar, who was playing with Wonderlove, Stevie Wonder's band at the time. And Carlos Alomar, who was playing with David Bowie. So this is my first session. So I'm like, you know, this is like, wow, I'm at Electric Lady. This is what I want to do, you know. My second session was at the Hit Factory, which was unbelievable for me to have my second session be at the famous Hit Factory in New York. And that session, Leon Pendarvis was on keyboards, Anthony Jackson was on bass, and I believe Jeff Marinoff was on guitar. And that was maybe David Spinoza may have been on that as well. I'm not really sure. So that was my second session. So right then I knew, you know, I just knew what I wanted to do. So that was the caliber of musicianship that I was surrounded with at a very young age. And besides like the bands I grew up with playing in the Bronx and so on and so forth, you know, that when I started doing sessions, I was like, wow, this is incredible. And I learned a lot every day. Every measure of music I played, I was learning, you know, because I was, you know, the A-Team guys were like Steve Gadd and Rick Marotta, Chris Parker, Bernard Purdie, you name it. I mean, all the, I'm missing, you know, I'm not naming a million other players, you know, but it was incredible, the amount of musicianship in New York. So just to get my foot in was a miracle in itself. And when I saw, you know, so I was playing with all these people, and then I did a record that there was a lot of time taken doing these rhythm tracks. I'll never forget this. It was a record that I was recording out in Jersey. My favorite studio at the time was the House of Music in West Orange, New Jersey, and late Charlie Conrad owned and ran that studio, and he taught me a lot about engineering. And so we were working on this record as you know, a lot of hard work going into these tracks. It was a really big deal. And then when the record came out, it didn't sound as good as I thought it should sound. You know, and I thought, you know, I could do that, you know. So I said, you know, well, you know, I really, you know, in my ear, the production of this should have come out differently. So, and I was really into the record making process. So I always watched this when I started doing television. It was the same thing. I started looking at what everybody was doing and how they were doing it and who the best people were doing it and what their secrets were. And I would pick people's brains. I didn't have any problem asking a lot of questions. It was pretty much a little pest, actually. But I learned a lot, and I thought, you know, I could do that. And I really loved the process. I love everything about recording, you know. So that's really how I got into it. One of my favorite things is the creating of a track. I love it. This is a creative field, you know, where you start out with sometimes nothing, or sometimes just the bare bones of a song, and then over time it blossoms into this thing, and hopefully it blossoms into something really good, and that's a wonderful thing, to be at the end of the process and to hear it come out the way you'd like it to come out. Because see, as a side person, you can plan a lot of people's recordings and stuff, you don't get to, you don't have a say on how the thing comes out. So you may have aspirations of, or ideas about what it could have sounded like and stuff, but it doesn't mean that it's going to come out that way. I don't let some kind of technical thing stop when the creative energy is flowing. It's your job to capture that as a producer. You're supposed to capture that energy, and then if you have to fix it later, whatever kind of thing, then you do that later. But if you don't have a performance, you don't have anything, so it doesn't really matter. I remember doing a session one time in the 80s on a huge artist. I mean, at the top of the world at that time. And we were cutting the track, and a piece of outboard gear broke down, and it stopped the session. And I could not believe that the session was brought to a halt because of this one piece of outboard gear breaking down. And I could not believe what I was seeing and witnessing, and the amount of money that was being spent, and all of a sudden we're not recording because there's one, reverb plate shut down. I just couldn't believe it. So that wasn't. I learned something on that session, because I looked at all the musicians who were, mostly upset and kind of befuddled by the whole thing, and then looking at, as a producer, waste. I mean, that's money you're paying for. Now you're not doing it. I mean, come on. And then the thing is, we were right there. We were right on the verge of getting the take. And then we're not going to do because the reverb is not working. I mean, what is happening, So that was something that I never forgot. I never wanted to have that happen on one of my dates.
Sounds like